You're saying my son paid you to follow me? That was the moment everything inside me cracked, not from surprise, but from something deeper. Something already fractured. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just stared at the man standing across from me in the church parking lot, the afternoon sun casting long shadows between us. My fingers gripped the grocery bag like it could anchor me to something solid. It couldn't. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Ruthie Johnson, a mother, a retired schoolteacher, a widow. I'm 62 years old. I've lived in the same brick house in Greenville, South Carolina, for nearly 4 decades. I taught 3rd grade for 30 years. I've lived a quiet, honest life. I buried the love of my life 3 years ago. Since then, I've learned how silence can become a second skin. But nothing prepares you for betrayal from your own blood. Just 3 days before this moment in the parking lot, my son Jordan sat across from me in my living room, his leg bouncing, eyes sharp in that way I used to love when he was solving puzzles as a kid. Now, it made my stomach twist. "How much did Dad leave you?" he asked, for the 3rd time that week. I sipped my tea and said nothing. "Mom, you can't just sit there. You owe me at least that much." "I don't owe you anything," I said quietly, "and your father left everything in order." And quote, "The first aider." "That's not an answer," he snapped. "It's the only one you'll get," I said, still calm. Because I knew something he didn't. Jordan was drowning in debt. I'd heard the whispers from his wife. Payday loans, gambling, bad investments. I wasn't going to feed his desperation with blind generosity. Not again. "You're unbelievable," he hissed, "sitting on who knows how much while your own son is struggling." "You've never come to me with humility," I said. "Only with expectations." The first 18 naders persevered. End quote. Then came the words I'll never forget. "You selfish old bitch. You don't even love your own child." I remember the silence afterward, how it rang louder than his voice. His wife, Tasha, who'd been pretending to scroll on her phone, suddenly looked up and added, "Maybe if you stopped pretending to be some kind of saint and actually helped your family, we wouldn't be in this mess." And then Jordan threw a glass ashtray. It missed my face by inches but struck my shoulder, shattering. Pain bloomed like fire under my skin. I didn't scream. I just stood and said, "You need to leave." That was the last time I saw him until this moment, through the words of a stranger. "I'm sorry," the man said again, his voice dragging me back to the present. "I didn't know who you were. Not until just now." I looked at him tall, weathered, his coat too heavy for the mild day. "And what exactly was my son hoping to find?" I asked. "That I've got a secret lover stashed in the attic? That I'm laundering money through bingo night?" He had the nerve to look ashamed. "He said you might be hiding assets. That he was worried you weren't mentally capable anymore. That maybe you'd misused some of the inheritance." I barked a laugh. "I drive a car that coughs in the morning and shop at discount markets. What kind of criminal mastermind do I look like to you?" He didn't answer. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I recognize you," he said slowly. "Took me a second, but I know who you are." My breath caught. "You taught at Jefferson Elementary. I was a student there." My eyes narrowed. There was a crash. On Route 12, a school bus. Rainy afternoon. My knees went weak. I was one of the kids. You pulled me out, wrapped me in your coat, told me I'd be okay. His voice was rough now, like gravel under tires. "You remembered that?" "I never forgot," he said. "I owe you my life." End quote. We stood there, 2 people in a storm of a memory. I remembered the blood, the fear, the weight of children in my arms. I remembered his face, dirt-streaked and terrified. "And yet," I said finally, "you took money to trail me like a thief." "I didn't know. If I'd known." He paused. "I'll stop, but I can also help you." I kept the records, the emails, the voicemails, everything he asked me to find. "I'll hand it over. I'll testify." My heart dropped. "Testify? He's going that far?" "He's building a case, Mrs. Johnson. He wants to prove you're not fit to manage your estate. He's filing a petition for financial guardianship." My world stopped. My own son was trying to have me legally declared incapable. And for what? I took a long breath, steadying the tremble in my hands. "What's your name?" "Elliot." "Well, Elliot," I said, "seems you're the only man in this town who remembers what I did for him." He nodded, ashamed. "And my son," I whispered. "He only remembers what he thinks I owe." As I turned and walked toward my car, I felt the bruise on my shoulder ache beneath my coat, the reminder of my son's anger, the weight of what came next. That was the moment I knew. I hadn't just lost his respect, I'd lost his love. If you felt Ruthie's pain, leave a like and drop your city in the comments. You might be surprised who's watching along with you. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath right along with me. I made a pot of chamomile tea I didn't drink and left it cooling on the counter. My shoulder ached from the bruise, but it wasn't the pain keeping me awake, it was the shame. Not mine. His. My son's. And mine too, in a different way, the shame of having raised a man who could look his mother in the eye and throw something at her when she didn't hand over what he believed was rightfully his. I sat on the old recliner, James's recliner, really. He used to fall asleep in it watching football on mute, sipping black coffee even at night. I could almost hear the creak as he leaned back, smell the peppermint oil I used to rub into his knees. "What would you have said to him?" I whispered to the empty room. "Would you have made him leave too?" That morning in the church parking lot kept replaying in my mind. Elliot, the private investigator. The little boy I pulled from a bus wreck who had become the man paid to follow me around. And yet, he had chosen to tell me the truth. That meant something, didn't it? Around 7 a.m., I heard the knock at my door. I moved slowly, not because of my age or the bruise, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to open it. I hadn't seen Jordan since he'd hurt me. I wasn't sure I wanted to see him again, not until I could look at him without seeing the man who thought I was a wallet wrapped in skin. But it wasn't Jordan. It was Elliot. He stood on my porch, holding a large manila envelope in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. "I got the good stuff," he said, lifting the cup slightly. "None of that drive-through mud." I didn't smile. I stepped aside and let him in. He took the same chair Jordan had sat in 3 days ago, and I had to look away for a moment, to not let the memory boil over. "I brought everything I've got," he said, placing the envelope on the table. "Emails, logs, photos. I didn't touch your trash, but I know he wanted me to." I said no. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the table. "He offered a bonus if I could find proof you were hiding cash. Offshore stuff. He even asked me to try and get a voice sample, see if you ever slipped up and mentioned an account he didn't know about." "Of course he did," I muttered. Elliot leaned forward. "I've worked some dirty jobs, Mrs. Johnson, but this was wrong from the start. I kept going because it's what I do. But after I remembered who you were, after I remembered what you did for me, it stopped being a job." He slid the envelope closer. "I want you to have this before he uses any of it. You deserve to know." I reached for the envelope, fingers trembling slightly. "You're giving up your paycheck." He shrugged. "You already paid me, 30 years ago, in the rain. That did it." I looked at him then, really looked at him. His eyes weren't young anymore, but they were the same, wide, dark, honest. I remembered them filled with tears and blood and fear. And now, regret. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were printouts, emails from Jordan full of legal language and impatience, photos of me walking into the bank, at the pharmacy, sitting on my porch, notes scribbled on the back of receipts, meals I'd ordered, the times I left the house. "He wanted a pattern," Elliot said. "Something to suggest you were hiding meetings or spending inconsistently." I looked up. "And did you find anything?" "Just one thing," he said, "that you're the loneliest person I've ever had to follow." That hit harder than anything else. I turned to the fireplace, where James's urn sat above the mantel. "He would have been ashamed of Jordan," I whispered. "Maybe, maybe not. Fathers see things differently sometimes. I raised him alone mostly. James worked long hours. I taught Jordan right from wrong. I read him the Bible, taught him how to fold his shirts, how to say yes ma'am and no sir. And yet, people change," Elliot said. "Sometimes not for the better." He stood. "I'll be around. If you need me. And if this goes legal, if he really files for guardianship, I'll testify." "You'd do that? For you?" "Absolutely." He reached for the door, then paused. "You were the first adult who ever made me feel safe. I don't forget that." When his knot makes to the stick stacking. When he left, I sat down again. The house was still quiet, but it no longer felt empty. For the first time in days, I didn't feel entirely alone. But I knew what was coming. Jordan wasn't going to stop, and I had to prepare, because my own son was coming for me, not with fists, but with paperwork, courts, and lies. And I wasn't about to let him win. After Elliot left, I didn't open the envelope again. Not right away. I placed it gently in the drawer next to James's old Bible, the one with dog-eared pages and underlined verses in blue ink. I needed time. Time to let the truth settle without cutting me too deep. Instead, I made myself breakfast for the first time in days. Real breakfast. Grits, turkey sausage, a soft egg, and toast. I even set the table, like James was coming down the hall. Old habits never leave. They just wait quietly in corners until you need them again. Halfway through eating, my mind wandered back to the past. Not to Jordan, not yet, but to the day that changed Elliot's life and mine. It was a Thursday in October. Pouring rain, the kind that turns streets into rivers and makes you wonder if God's washing the world clean. I was 29, teaching a class of 32 third graders. That afternoon, the field trip to the county museum had been cut short because the power went out. The kids were disappointed. I was exhausted. On the way back, we took the long route. I remember singing "This Little Light of Mine" with the children as the bus crawled along Route 12. Then everything went sideways, literally. The sound of tires slipping, the screams, the hard jolt as the bus skidded and rolled down into the ditch. I remember crawling over seats, glass crunching under my knees. I remember pulling out those babies one by one, my arms bleeding from shards, my lungs filled with smoke and fear. I found Elliot last, wedged beneath a seat, blood on his temple, a broken arm bent at a wrong angle. He looked at me then with the same eyes I saw yesterday. He was terrified but silent, holding it in like boys do when they think they have to be strong. I wrapped my coat around him and told him he'd be okay. And now, 33 years later, he'd done the same for me. It's strange, isn't it? How kindness loops back, years later, like a paper airplane finally landing where it was meant to. Around 11, I heard the mail slot click. I went to the door, picked up the envelope lying on the floor. Legal stationery, my name typed across the front. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Still, I did. It was a formal letter from Jordan's lawyer, stating he intended to pursue protective conservatorship over my estate, that he was concerned I was experiencing memory lapses and had made financial decisions that endangered the integrity of the estate, that he would be filing with the probate court in the next 14 business days. I sat down slowly. It was happening. He wasn't bluffing. I pressed the paper to my chest and breathed, not because I was afraid. No, I was angry like I hadn't been in years. There's a fire that comes to older women when they've been quiet too long, when they've given everything, and the world decides to ask for more. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Walter Ashburn speaking. "Walter, it's Ruthie." A pause. "Ruthie Johnson?" he said, surprise in his voice. "Good heavens, it's been years. I need a favor." "Anything," he said without hesitation. "You sound serious." "I am. Jordan's trying to take me to court. I need to know exactly what's in the estate James left behind and what's in my name alone." Walter had been James's lawyer, friend, and sometimes poker buddy. He knew things about our finances even I didn't. He cleared his throat. "That won't be a problem. I'll pull the files and have you come in." "Thank you, Walter." "Ruthie," he said gently. "Are you all right?" I hesitated. "No," I said, "but I will be." Later that afternoon, I took out the envelope Elliot had given me. I spread out the documents across the dining table. Dates, times, locations. Jordan's emails, so full of urgency and entitlement it made my stomach turn. "Don't let her play the old lady card," one of them said. "She's sharp but slippery. Pretends she's broke, she's hiding something, I know it." I touched the words with my finger like they were flame. He thought I was pretending, that I was manipulating. I'd given him everything, my time, my money, my love, and now he wanted control. But something caught my eye, a line in one of the reports. "Subject visits First National Bank once a month, always on the 15th, remains for approximately 20 minutes. Envelope exchanged with teller." I frowned. I did go to the bank monthly, but not to withdraw money. I deposited checks. Not from James's estate, but from somewhere else. A memory stirred. A conversation I'd had with James the year before he passed. "If anything ever happens to me," he had said, "Walter knows what to do. Don't open anything until you need to." "Need to?" I'd asked. "You'll know." And now I did. There was something else. Something James had left behind. Something even I didn't fully understand. But Walter might. I gathered the papers into a folder, then stood and looked at myself in the mirror above the mantel. I didn't look fragile. I didn't look crazy. I looked like a woman who was about to fight back. The law office smelled the same as it had 20 years ago: leather, paper, and a trace of lemon polish. It was tucked above a dry cleaner's downtown, where the stairs creaked with the weight of every regret and secret that had ever walked up them. I used to come here with James once a year, every spring, when we did our taxes and updated our wills. We used to joke that someday Walter Ashburn would outlive us both, just so he could say, "I told you so." Now, I was alone. And Walter looked older. "Ruthie," he said, coming around the desk with a warm, careful smile. "I'm glad you came in." He pulled out a chair for me. His office hadn't changed. Same dusty law books, same framed certificate from Clemson Law School. Same picture of his late wife on the bookshelf, Ellen, who used to send me her biscuit recipe every Christmas, even though I never once managed to get them to rise. "I won't waste your time," I said. "You know why I'm here." He nodded. "I've been through the files. James left everything clean. The house is in your name. The joint accounts were transferred legally. There's no opening for Jordan to contest unless he can prove you're mentally incompetent." "He's trying," Walter sighed. "I've read the letter from his attorney. It's aggressive. He's alleging signs of cognitive decline based on statements from neighbors and family." I raised an eyebrow. "Family? He means his wife. Tasha wouldn't know cognitive decline if it walked into her nail salon and paid for a deluxe pedicure," I muttered. Walter chuckled. "I always liked your fire, Ruthie, but this isn't just a nuisance. He's filing under the Elder Vulnerability Act. If he can convince a judge that you're at risk of financial exploitation or that you're a danger to your own assets, he can be granted conservatorship. So he wants to make me legally helpless." Walter nodded. "Yes." I sat back, letting the words settle. Then I remembered. There was something James said to me before he died. He mentioned a file. Something I shouldn't open until I needed to. "You know what he meant?" Walter's eyes twitched just slightly. "Ah, yes, that is Rend." He reached into the cabinet behind him and pulled out a locked tin box. He opened it with a tiny silver key that had his initials engraved on the head. Inside was a single red envelope, thick, sealed with wax. He handed it to me. "I promised James I wouldn't give you this unless you asked, unless something forced you to." "Well," I said, "consider me forced." I broke the seal. Inside was a ledger. A simple notebook, handwritten, like James had poured his soul into every page. I scanned the entries, dates, names, amounts. Then I saw it. A trust, established 12 years ago, funded with payments made quarterly into an account I didn't know existed. And the beneficiary? Not Jordan. Me! I blinked. James had created a separate trust in my name, for me alone. It was to be released in full on my 65th birthday, unless earlier needed for medical reasons or legal threat. "This was his way of protecting you," Walter said. "He saw something in Jordan he didn't like. He said if push ever came to shove, this would keep you safe." I felt tears rise, but I blinked them away. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he made me promise. And James, well, you remember when he made a promise, it was scripture." I closed the ledger gently. "Will Jordan find this?" "No, he doesn't know it exists. It was filed under a different legal name. He'd need both the ledger and my cooperation to even sniff near it." "And you won't give him either," I said. Walter smiled. "Ruthie, I've known you 35 years. I saw the way you took care of James, how you raised Jordan. That boy doesn't deserve to shine your shoes." I exhaled, a weight lifting from my chest. But not all the way, because Jordan wouldn't back down, and now I had proof that James had planned for that very betrayal. As I stood to leave, Walter handed me a second envelope. "What's this?" "A letter. From James. He left it in the tin box with instructions to give it to you if you ever opened the ledger." My throat tightened. I took it and tucked it into my purse. "Thank you, Walter, for keeping your promise." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This battle's only getting started." Outside, the sky was darkening. I walked slowly, feeling the chill bite through my coat. I didn't open the letter on the street. I waited until I got home. I made a cup of tea, sat on the couch, held the letter like it was a piece of my husband come back to life. And then I read it. "Ruthie, if you're reading this, then it means Jordan's done something I hoped he never would. I wanted to believe he'd grow into a man of character, but if you're here now, then I know I was wrong. You have always been the heart of this family. You held it together when I was working nights, when money was tight, when grief came in waves. This trust is yours. It's not about money, it's about dignity, about not having to beg for what's already yours. Stand strong. You've always known how. James." I folded the letter slowly, pressed it to my lips. Then I stood up. If my son wanted a fight, he was about to see what I looked like when I wasn't afraid. I didn't call Jordan after reading James's letter. I didn't need to, because 2 days later, he came knocking unannounced, uninvited, and full of false warmth. I saw his black SUV pull up from my kitchen window. He stepped out in a tailored navy jacket, sunglasses, even though it was cloudy, and a confident gait that would have fooled anyone who hadn't raised him. But I knew better. The knock was polite, calculated. I didn't answer right away. I let him wait. When I finally opened the door, I didn't speak. I stepped aside and let him in. "Hi, Ma," he said, like nothing had happened. No apology, no mention of the glass ashtray, of the bruise that had turned yellow-green on my shoulder. He glanced around the living room. "You redecorate?" "No," I said flatly. He sat on the edge of the sofa, like a guest, not the son who used to fall asleep here with graham cracker crumbs on his face. "I've been thinking," he said, smiling like a man trying to sell something. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "Which time?" I asked. He ignored the jab. "Look, I know things have been tense, but I'm worried about you. Genuinely. And I think we need to have a conversation about your future, about the house, the accounts. What happens if something happens to you?" I crossed my arms. "You mean what happens if I die?" He had the nerve to chuckle. "Don't be dramatic. Don't be slick," I snapped. "You're not here because you care about my future. You're here because you want control." His smile faltered. I walked to the mantel and picked up James's letter. I didn't hand it to him, just held it. "Your father left me something," I said. "Something you didn't know about, and now I know why." He shifted in his seat. "You're being paranoid. I'm just trying to help. By hiring a private investigator? By telling lawyers I'm mentally unfit? That's not help. That's betrayal." His face hardened. "You don't know what I'm dealing with, Mom. You've never had to carry the kind of debt I'm in. You don't understand how desperate things have gotten." End quote. "No, I don't," I said, "because I didn't dig myself into that hole. You did." He stood now, his voice rising. "I'm your son, your only son, and you're sitting on money that could save me, but you'd rather let me drown than lift a finger." I stared at him. And then I said, "You threw a glass at me, Jordan." That stopped him cold. His jaw clenched. He looked at the floor. I was upset. "You hurt me. I didn't mean to, but you did. And now you think you can walk in here and gaslight me into giving you more?" His eyes turned hard. "If you think that little speech is going to stop this process, you're wrong. I'm already moving forward with the petition. You'll be evaluated. And when the court sees how unstable you are..." "You'll what?" I asked. "Take my house, my bank accounts, my dignity?" He didn't answer. I stepped closer, eyes locked with his. "You may win in court, Jordan. You've got lawyers and lies and a very rehearsed victim act. But you've forgotten something." "What?" "I'm your mother. And I know you. Better than anyone. And I've got something stronger than fear." "What's that?" "Proof, witnesses, and a husband who planned for this day better than you ever could." That cracked the mask. Just for a second. He turned away, walked to the door. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." He left without another word. And when the door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and picked up the phone. I called Elliot. "We need to talk," I said. "It's time we take this to court before he does." He didn't hesitate. Tell me where and when." The next morning came with a bite in the air, February cold and mean. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, pulled on my coat, and headed to the diner on Whitmore Avenue, the one with the chipped booths and the best peach cobbler in town. Elliot was already there, waiting in a corner booth, coffee in hand, eyes scanning the window like he was expecting trouble to follow me in. He stood when I approached, always polite. "Morning, Mrs. Johnson. I told you to call me Ruthie." "Hard habit to break," he said, smiling softly. I sat across from him, slid into the cracked vinyl seat, and took the cup of tea the waitress set down like it was a lifeline. "Did he contact you?" I asked. "Not yet, but I spoke to a lawyer friend last night, a woman I trust, tough as nails. She's seen cases like this before, family trying to gaslight elders into giving up control." "She have a name?" "Vanessa Clark. She specializes in elder law and estate protection. If anyone can help you build a defense before Jordan moves, it's her." "Good. I want to meet her." "I figured you would," he said, sliding a card across the table. I set up a meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Her office is 2 blocks from the courthouse. I picked up the card, felt the weight of it. "Thank you, Elliot. I mean it." "You don't have to thank me," he said, then paused. "But I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." I looked up. "Is there anything in your past financially, legally, personally, that could be used against you? Anything Jordan might dig up and twist?" I didn't flinch. "No drugs, no arrests, no secrets. I taught children for 30 years, paid my taxes, stayed faithful to a man who wasn't always kind, but who never stopped providing. The worst I ever did was eat cake for breakfast." Elliot chuckled. "That makes you one of the cleanest clients I've ever had." I sipped my tea. "Jordan's building a narrative. He'll say I'm hiding assets, acting erratically. He'll point to the time I forgot the name of my pharmacist, or the bruise on my shoulder, and try to turn it into proof of decline. Arisa then will beat him with facts and character witnesses. The truth is on your side." "The truth don't always win," I said quietly. "No," Elliot agreed, "but sometimes it fights louder." We left the diner after an hour, and I walked back to my car alone. The cold air woke me up, sharpened my edges. For the first time in weeks, I felt more prepared than afraid. The next morning, I walked into Vanessa Clark's office exactly at 10. She was younger than I expected, early 40s maybe. Sharp gray suit, sharp eyes. Her handshake was firm, her voice crisp. "I've reviewed the documents Mr. Hart sent me," she said, referring to Elliot. "Your son's approach is aggressive but sloppy. He's relying on emotional manipulation and fabricated concern. That's not uncommon in conservatorship abuse cases." "Is that what this is?" "Yes," she said flatly. "What your son is doing is a form of elder coercion. It's been increasing the past few years, children forcing legal control over aging parents to seize property, finances, even benefits. But we have an edge. You're mentally sharp, financially stable, and most importantly, you've documented everything." "I didn't document it," I said. "Elliot did." "Well, thank God he did," she said, "because we'll use it all. I'm go." And finally gone. We spent the next 2 hours going over my finances, my health records, and a timeline of my interactions with Jordan over the past 6 months. Vanessa took notes like a courtroom stenographer. "I want to get ahead of this," she said, "which means we file a preemptive petition for estate safeguarding. It puts a flag on your assets and requires any future claim, like the one your son is planning, to go through a higher scrutiny process. Will that stop him?" "No, but it'll slow him. And it sends a message. You're not afraid." I nodded. "I'll also request a court-appointed psychological evaluation," she continued. "You pass that, and his claims of incompetence dissolve." "Do I need to be worried about that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She looked me in the eye. "No." When I left her office, I felt the chill again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was resolve. I called Elliot as I walked back to the car. "She's good," I said. "Told you?" End quote. "He's not going to see this coming." "No," Elliot said, "but he's going to feel it." That night I sat by the fireplace, James's letter in my lap, and whispered, "I'm doing what you asked, love. I'm standing strong." And I meant it. The courtroom smelled like bleach and dust, sterile, ancient, and indifferent. I sat in the second row behind Vanessa, my hands clasped around a worn leather purse like it could protect me. I'd carried this purse since 1989. James once teased me that it looked like something out of a detective movie. Maybe that was fitting now. Jordan was already there when I walked in. So was Tasha. She wore a black blazer, too much perfume, and a smile she probably thought was humble. It wasn't. Jordan didn't look at me at first. He sat at the plaintiff's table, whispering to his attorney, a man with gelled hair, sharp shoes, and no soul behind the eyes. I couldn't stop looking at him. My son, my only child, the one I used to carry when he had night terrors, the one who broke his collarbone playing baseball in 7th grade and cried in my lap for an hour, the one whose face I wiped with spit on a tissue before every school photo. Now he was sitting across the aisle, trying to strip me of my rights. Vanessa leaned toward me. "Stay calm. He's going to lie. That's his strategy." I nodded. The judge entered. An older black woman with steel gray hair and glasses low on her nose. Her nameplate read, Honorable Marjorie L. Creighton. I liked her already. The room stood, then sat. "Let's proceed," Judge Creighton said, scanning the file in front of her. Jordan's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, we're here today because Mr. Jordan Johnson is concerned for the well-being and financial safety of his mother, Ruthie Johnson. He believes she is exhibiting signs of cognitive decline and has potentially mismanaged significant funds from her late husband's estate." End quote. "Has she been diagnosed with any form of dementia?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor," the attorney admitted, "but we believe there are behavioral patterns consistent with early symptoms, memory lapses, isolation, irrational financial secrecy." Vanessa stood next. "Your Honor, this is a case of attempted coercive control. Mrs. Johnson has no medical or psychological history to support these claims. In fact, she has voluntarily submitted to a cognitive evaluation, which I'll enter into the record now." She handed a file to the clerk. The judge flipped through it. "Test results are well within healthy range," she said. Jordan's lawyer shifted tactics. "She's still refusing to disclose information about the estate. She's evading her son, her only child, who has every right to be concerned." Vanessa cut in. "Concern is not control, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson hired a private investigator to follow his mother. He attempted to collect audio recordings. He filed this petition days after verbally assaulting her in her home and throwing an object that caused physical injury." The judge's head lifted. "Is that true?" Jordan's face turned red. "Your Honor," he began, standing, "that's being taken out of context. My mother, she was withholding information. She was antagonistic. I acted out of frustration. She needed medical attention for her shoulder," Vanessa said coldly. "We have documentation, photographs, a statement from a witness who's willing to testify under oath." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Who is this witness?" "Elliot Hart, former private investigator, employed by Mr. Johnson himself. He's turned over evidence of coercion and intent." Jordan's lawyer whispered something to him, and I saw it, that flicker in my son's eyes. Panic. The judge leaned back. "This doesn't look good, Mr. Johnson. What I see here is a grown man attempting to assume control of his mother's assets through force, manipulation, and intimidation." Jordan stood again. "She's hiding money," he shouted. "I know she is. My dad didn't just leave her everything without thinking of me." His voice echoed in the courtroom. Tasha reached for his arm, but he yanked it away. "She's playing everyone like she always does. She sits there, all quiet and saintly, but she's just—" "That's enough," the judge said, slamming her gavel once. "Sit down, Mr. Johnson." He sat, chest heaving. Judge Creighton turned to Vanessa. "I'm granting the motion to delay Mr. Johnson's petition. In the meantime, I'm ordering a full review of his financial records. If we find signs of financial distress, gambling, or manipulation, this case will be dismissed permanently." Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Johnson, do you feel safe in your home?" I hesitated. "No," I said. "Not if he thinks he can still win." The judge nodded. "You have the court's protection, ma'am. And from what I've seen today, you also have your dignity." Her gavel hit wood. Case adjourned. As I walked out of the courtroom, Vanessa at my side, I didn't look back at Jordan. I didn't need to. That part of me, the mother who longed for him to be the boy he used to be, was gone now. I was done hoping. I didn't expect to see Tasha again so soon. It was 4 days after the hearing. I was sitting on my porch, a blanket wrapped around my legs, the morning air still sharp, sipping lukewarm tea. The sky was gray, like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or clear. I liked that kind of sky, it matched how I felt inside. Then her car pulled up. Same silver Lexus, spotless as ever. She stepped out slowly, like someone trying not to spook a dog, heels clicking on the pavement, hair flawless, lipstick too red for a casual visit. I didn't stand. "Morning, Ruthie," she said cautiously. "You're brave," I replied, not unkindly. "Or foolish." She forced a smile. I was hoping we could talk. I gestured to the other chair. "You can sit. I won't bite." She sat gingerly, crossed her legs, and looked at me like she was searching for the right opening. "I didn't know he was going to do that," she said softly. "The court thing." I raised an eyebrow. "You helped write the statement." "If courts." She hesitated. "Yes, but he said it was just for concern, that it wouldn't go that far. I didn't know he'd lie under oath, or that he hurt you." I looked out at the street, watched a boy ride by on a bike too small for him. He threw something at me, Tasha. I still have the bruise. "I'm sorry." "I don't need sorry," I said. "I need to understand how we got here. You were in my home, ate at my table, called me Mama Ruth. What changed?" She didn't answer right away. She picked at the hem of her sleeve. "He promised me," she whispered. "He promised me we'd be set, that once everything was settled, we'd have the house, the accounts, security. And you were okay with that? With gutting me like a fish to get it?" Her eyes filled, but I didn't soften. "Not yet. I grew up with nothing," she said. "My mama worked 3 jobs. My dad vanished before I was born. I learned early that security isn't given. You have to take it. And Jordan, he made it sound like it was already his, that your husband wanted it to be his." "My husband wanted me safe," I said. "And he knew his son. That's why he planned for this." "I believe you," she said, surprising me. "Now I do." I watched her carefully. "Why are you really here?" She looked down. "Because I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of what he'll do next." I sat straighter. "He's not stopping," she said. "That judge may have delayed him, but he's talking to another lawyer. Someone meaner. He's calling banks, trying to find accounts you don't know about. He's angry, Ruthie, angrier than I've ever seen him. He's unraveling." "Yes, and I don't want to be there when he breaks." I studied her for a long moment. "Do you love him?" I asked. She looked startled. "I don't know anymore." That was enough truth for me. "Then leave," I said simply. "Take what dignity you have left and go." "I would," she said. "But he has things. Emails. Records from when I helped with the first lawyer. He said he'd use them against me if I turned on him." I exhaled. "Tasha, let me be clear. I don't want revenge. I want peace. But if he keeps pushing, I'll do what I have to do. And if you really want out, you need to help me end this." She looked up. "How?" "Testify," I said. "Tell the court what you know, what you did, what he did. Come clean." She was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. "I'll think about it." "No," I said gently. "You'll decide. Now." She stared at her hands, then looked at me, and for once, the arrogance was gone. She looked like a woman who had finally realized the cost of her choices. "I'll testify," I nodded. "Good, because the truth doesn't work unless we tell it out loud." As she stood to leave, I added, "One more thing." She turned. "I may never forgive you," I said, "but I won't forget this. And that's something." She swallowed hard. "Thank you for not slamming the door in my face." "Now is W-2 now?" "I still might," I said, cracking the smallest smile. She laughed, sad and honest, and walked to her car. And just like that, I had a new witness. A shaky one, maybe, but sometimes the most broken voices are the ones the jury hears loudest. Vanessa's office was warm that afternoon, sunlight pouring through the window in long, golden stripes across her desk. I sat across from her, my fingers lightly tracing the edge of James's ledger, the pages still worn with time and ink. Tasha had agreed to testify, but the court date hadn't been set yet. We needed more. "There's something in here," I said, tapping the ledger. "Something that still doesn't make sense." Vanessa leaned forward. "What are you seeing?" I opened to the last third of the book. These entries, these deposits made into an account labeled with a coded reference. It's not tied to our joint accounts or the trust you found. She narrowed her eyes. Could it be a shadow account? James wouldn't hide money from me. Not unless… Unless what? I looked up. Unless he wanted to hide it from someone else. Vanessa's lips parted. Jordan. Exactly. I pointed to the last entry just 2 months before James died. It read, Final transfer. GR. Confirmed. Vanessa frowned. Who's GR? I don't know, I admitted. It's not a name I recognize. But he always used initials for privacy. She picked up her phone. Let me call Elliot. End quote. 20 minutes later, Elliot walked in, still in his denim jacket and boots, like he'd just stepped off a stakeout. I showed him the ledger. He stared. GR. That rings a bell. He pulled out his tablet, flipped through notes. Wait. When I was following Jordan, he had a meeting in a parking garage with someone named Glenn Raymond. Vanessa's eyes lit up. You think this GR is Glenn Raymond? It could be, Elliot said. Raymond's got a rep. He used to run scams with fake business fronts, shell companies. If James moved money through him, it might have been for protection, or to funnel assets safely. I felt a chill. You think James knew Jordan would come for me one day? I think, Vanessa said slowly, your husband knew his son had darker inclinations than you ever wanted to believe. Elliot pulled out a USB. I've got footage of Jordan's meeting with Raymond. Audio's weak, but you can make out parts. Enough to get a court order for Raymond's records. Vanessa took it. This is gold. If we can prove James moved money to protect it from Jordan, and that Jordan is now trying to force access, it shows clear motive and bad faith. I sat back in the chair, trying to make sense of it all. James hadn't just left me protection. He'd left a trail, a blueprint. He knew this fight would come. He was planning this all along, I whispered. He just never told me. Active ire. Maybe he didn't want to scare you, Vanessa said. Or maybe, Elliot added, he knew you'd only act when it mattered most. I looked out the window, watching the trees sway. Well, it matters now. Vanessa opened her calendar. Let's get ready. I'll submit a subpoena for Glenn Raymond's financial records, and I'll file a motion to include this ledger as central evidence in our defense. And Tasha? I asked. She's on standby. We'll prep her testimony this week. And quote, it is next my nowity. Elliot stood to leave, then turned to me. You still okay, Ruthie? I smiled faintly. I'm tired, Elliot, but I've got fire left. That night, at home, I pulled James's ledger back out and stared at the pages. Every number, every name. They weren't just records. They were his love letters to me. He'd fought in silence, with pen and paper, preparing for a war he'd never lived to see. Now it was my turn to finish it. 3 days later, I watched from the gallery bench as Glenn Raymond took the stand. He looked like a man who belonged in a noir film gray suit, greasy charm, and a permanent smirk that said he'd been one step ahead of justice for far too long. But today, Vanessa was ready to catch him mid-step. He adjusted his tie as the bailiff swore him in. His eyes darted across the courtroom, briefly meeting mine. I didn't flinch. Vanessa stood, calm, composed. Mr. Raymond, do you recognize this ledger? She handed it to the clerk, who brought it to him. He glanced at the open page. Looks like banking records. Handwritten. Not yours? No, ma'am. But the initials G.R. appear in it, linked to multiple transactions. Does that not strike you as a coincidence? I got a common name. Glenn, Greg, Gary, could be anyone. Vanessa smiled coolly. Let's help narrow it down. I have graded. She clicked the remote, and the screen behind the judge lit up still shots from Elliot's surveillance footage. One showed Jordan handing Raymond a manila envelope in a parking garage. Another captured a close-up of Raymond's license plate. Raymond's smile faded. Would you like to explain what this meeting was about? Vanessa asked. He cleared his throat. It was just business. What kind of business? Raymond shifted. I help clients set up trusts, shell companies, that sort of thing. I know. Vanessa stepped closer. You helped Jordan Johnson create a fake company to access assets tied to his late father's estate, didn't you? He didn't answer. You're under oath, Raymond exhaled. Look, I just followed instructions. Jordan said the money belonged to him. He needed to redirect it so his mother couldn't get to it first. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, mine included. I knew Jordan had become cold, manipulative, but to actively try to siphon off what James left me before the will could be processed? It was beyond betrayal. It was theft. Vanessa pressed on. Did you ever meet James Johnson? No, Raymond said. I only dealt with Jordan. So all transfers made through your services were at Jordan's direction? Yes. Vanessa turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have enough evidence to move for a protective estate injunction and to charge Mr. Johnson with attempted financial fraud under Section 642.3 of the Elder Asset Protection Code. The judge nodded. Motion granted. Court will pursue full investigation. And Mr. Raymond, you'll be held in contempt if you withhold anything else. Raymond nodded quickly, now pale. Court adjourned for the day. As we walked out, I could feel the weight on my shoulders lift just slightly. Vanessa pulled me aside in the hallway. That was a major blow. Jordan won't recover from this easily. It's not Nate's. Will he be charged? I asked. Not yet, but he's close. And with Tasha's testimony lined up and the ledger authenticated, we've got enough to bury this attempt once and for all. I nodded. I want it public, Vanessa. I want people to know what he tried to do, not because I want revenge, but because I don't want any other woman in my shoes to think they're crazy for fighting back. She smiled. We'll make sure of it. That night, I sat on my porch again. Same blanket, same tea. Only this time, I was joined by Elliot. He didn't speak right away. Just sat beside me, staring at the stars. You ever think it'd come to this? I asked him. He chuckled. Not in a million years. You ever regret saving me that night 20 years ago? He looked at me, sincere. Not once. I nodded. Then let's finish what we started. And we sat there, silent but strong. 2 survivors. 1 war still left to fight. By the time the news broke, Jordan's phone must have been melting in his pocket. It started with a local journalist, Jenna Hayes, from the Montgomery Gazette. She called Vanessa's office requesting an interview, citing whispers about a contested estate case involving elder coercion. Vanessa asked me directly, did I want this public? I said yes. So Jenna came to my house, no cameras, just a recorder and a pad. She sat across from me at the kitchen table where I used to grade papers and plan Sunday dinners. Her questions were soft, respectful, but I didn't hold back. I told her everything. How my son started prying about the inheritance, the verbal abuse, the surveillance, the private investigator I hadn't known was watching me, the glass ashtray, the ledger, the meeting in the garage, the man on the stand who finally cracked. I told her about James, too, the way he protected me, even from the grave. 2 days later, the article dropped. Local widow battles own son in court over alleged inheritance scheme. It went viral, at least by small-town standards. Within hours, I was getting calls, old colleagues, church friends, even parents of students I'd taught 20 years ago. And I knew Jordan saw it, because that night, for the first time in weeks, I got a text from him. You really did it. Congrats. Enjoy the sympathy. I didn't reply. Let the silence speak louder than anything I could say. The next day, Tasha showed up at Vanessa's office to finalize her deposition. She brought emails, long threads between her and Jordan, outlining his plan to claim I was mentally unstable, fabricate spending habits, and leak private information to smear my credibility. Vanessa read them and whistled. He's cooked, but Tasha didn't look relieved. She looked scared. What is it? I asked her. She hesitated. Then, he's still hiding something worse. Vanessa leaned in. What do you mean? He didn't just want your money, Tasha whispered. He wanted revenge. Revenge for what? She looked at me, her voice barely a breath. He thinks you manipulated James into leaving him out of the will, that you poisoned his father against him. I blinked. That's not true. I know, she said. But he believes it. And he's been digging into James's last weeks, his medications, his appointments, his mental state. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Is he suggesting foul play? Tasha nodded slowly. He's planning to file for a forensic audit of James's death, to claim that you might have accelerated it. The room went silent. I clutched the arms of the chair. Not from guilt, but from disbelief. He's not just trying to take what's yours, Vanessa said grimly. He's trying to destroy your name. I closed my eyes. It wasn't grief this time. It wasn't even anger. It was war. Then we get ahead of it, I said. We prove what really happened. Every doctor, every nurse, every pill bottle. I can help, Tasha said. He made me delete some files, but I saved them. Appointments, prescriptions, audio from one of his rants. He doesn't know I still have them. Vanessa smiled tightly. You may have just saved your soul. That night, I went through James's old medical files myself. I found the notes from his hospice nurse, a woman named Donna I remembered clearly. Kind eyes, always wore lavender perfume. I called her. Of course I remember you, Mrs. Johnson, she said. Your husband was one of my favorite patients. Would you be willing to speak to a lawyer? I asked. She didn't even hesitate. Anything you need. And just like that, the narrative Jordan was trying to spin of a greedy old woman who manipulated a dying man began to unravel before it could even take hold. Because the truth? It has legs. And mine were just starting to walk. It was early morning when Vanessa called. Her voice was sharper than usual, brisk with urgency. I need you in my office today. 11 sharp. Bring anything else you've found. I knew from her tone something had shifted. I gathered James's files, the hospice documents, medication logs, and the handwritten thank you note from Donna, the hospice nurse. I packed them neatly into a manila folder and drove through the quiet streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than I realized. When I walked into Vanessa's office, Tasha was already there, pale and quiet, hands curled around a mug of untouched coffee. Vanessa wasted no time. We got word this morning. Jordan filed a petition with the county coroner's office requesting a post-mortem review of James's death. My breath caught. Is that even legal? I asked. It is, she replied, but it's rare. The coroner won't exhume a body without cause, but Jordan is using his access to the original attending physician's name to push for a toxicology reevaluation. I looked at Tasha. She couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't think he'd go this far. He's desperate, Vanessa said. We hit him hard with the fraud. He knows the financial angle is slipping away. Now he's trying to burn your reputation to the ground instead. And well, so the presentators and readably. I opened the folder and slid the documents across the table. Here, everything I've got. Hospice logs, nurse notes, pain management prescriptions, James's DNR. It's all there. Vanessa skimmed through the pages, nodding. This is good. Very good. And I spoke to Donna this morning. She's agreed to testify. She kept her own private notes, too. God bless her, I murmured. Vanessa looked up. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. We need to be ready for media spin, social media slander, and possibly more legal maneuvering. I don't care what they say about me, I said. I only care that the truth stays louder. Tasha cleared her throat. There's something else. We both turned to her. Jordan was trying to reach out to a former nurse from the hospital James stayed in 2 years before hospice. He thought there might be something in those records to suggest early manipulation, like maybe you convinced James to change the will during a time when he was weak. I folded my arms. That's ridiculous. We didn't even talk about the will until after his second stroke, and he was clear-headed. We had a lawyer present. He doesn't care about facts, Vanessa said. He's building a story. Tasha reached into her purse and handed over a flash drive. I recorded our conversation. He said if the judge won't listen to what he has, he'll leak it all to a podcast journalist and let public opinion take care of the rest. I stared at the flash drive in her palm, so small, yet so heavy. I never raised him like this, I said, my voice breaking for the first time in weeks. I don't know what I did wrong. Tasha placed the drive on the table. You didn't do anything wrong. Some people choose darkness, even when they're born into light. Vanessa nodded slowly. We use this. We show the court his intent to weaponize grief, weaponize legacy. That isn't just immoral, it's criminal. She looked at me. You ready to take the stand again? I straightened. I was born ready, but now I'm angry. Later that afternoon, Elliot drove me to visit Donna in person. She lived in a small cottage near the lake, warm and cluttered with plants and cat hair. She hugged me like an old friend. I always knew you might need me someday, she said, leading us to her kitchen table. She laid out her own notes. They matched mine almost to the word. James was tired, but he was sharp. He talked a lot about making peace, about protecting you. Said he wasn't worried about death, just what might come after, for you. I wiped a tear away. Did he ever mention Jordan? Donna's expression darkened. Only once. Said he regretted how much he'd overlooked, how much he enabled. I nodded. Elliot clicked his recorder off. That's enough. Thank you, ma'am. He was now. As we stepped outside, the sky was turning violet with dusk. I turned to Elliot. He's not going to stop, is he? No, he said. But neither are we. There's something sacred about a courtroom. Even with the fluorescent lighting and overused microphones, it feels like a cathedral of consequence. Words are prayers or weapons, depending on who's holding them. The day I took the stand again, I wore James's favorite color, a deep navy dress with pearl buttons. Vanessa had advised me to keep calm, speak clearly, and avoid getting pulled into emotional traps. But I already knew what to say. I'd been writing this testimony in my heart for months. The courtroom was packed, not with strangers, neighbors, former students, friends from church, people who had read the article or heard whispers and decided to show up, not for gossip, for solidarity. Jordan wasn't there. He'd chosen to waive his right to be present during this portion of the hearing, a move Vanessa called cowardice masquerading as strategy. His lawyer, however, sat stone-faced, arms crossed, tapping a pen in slow rhythm. "Please state your name for the record," the bailiff said. "Ruthie Mae Johnson. And your relation to the deceased?" "I was his wife. For 38 years. The judge nodded. "Mrs. Johnson, you may proceed with your statement." I took a breath and began. My husband, James, was not a perfect man, but he was a thoughtful one. In the last year of his life, he knew his time was short. He spoke often about legacy, not the money, not the estate, but the mark we leave behind in the hearts of the people we love. He wanted peace, not drama. I glanced around the room, then back to the judge. When James made changes to our estate plan, he did so with full legal counsel and mental clarity. He asked me not to involve our son, not out of spite, but out of fear. Fear that Jordan wouldn't respect his wishes. Fear that greed would cloud judgment. I paused. Vanessa gave me a slow nod. I've been called many things in the last few months. Greedy, manipulative, even dangerous. I stand here today to say I have done nothing but follow my husband's final wishes and protect what he entrusted me to guard. Then I lowered my voice slightly. I did not accelerate his death. I did not sway his decisions with deceit. What I did do was hold his hand when he could no longer speak. I fed him applesauce with crushed painkillers. I bathed him when he couldn't move. And when he finally closed his eyes, I was the last face he saw. That is the truth. The judge looked down for a moment, then back at me. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson." I stepped down slowly. As I returned to my seat, Donna walked past me and took the stand. She spoke plainly, confirmed everything I'd said. The medication schedule, the hospice protocols, James's clear-minded conversations. Then came the twist. Vanessa introduced the audio file. "Your Honor, we now present a private recording legally obtained of a conversation between Jordan Johnson and his wife, Tasha Johnson, in which he outlines his intent to challenge his father's will and discredit the mental state of both his parents." The courtroom held its breath. The judge allowed it. Vanessa played the file. Jordan's voice filled the room, angry, sharp, cruel. "She'll crack. She always does. If I can get them to exhume, even suggest something's off, she'll crumble under it. Public sympathy's cheap if you push the right buttons." There were gasps, some hands over mouths. A woman in the back whispered, "Dear Lord." When it ended, the judge called for a recess. I sat quietly, unmoving, my hands in my lap. Elliot leaned over. "That might have just sealed it." "I hope so," I whispered. As we stepped into the hallway, reporters waited. Vanessa handled them with grace. I didn't speak, but as I turned, I saw someone standing near the building's exit. Jordan. He wasn't supposed to be there, yet he was. He stared at me. I stared back. He didn't look angry. He looked lost, like someone who finally saw the house he burned and realized he'd locked himself inside. We didn't speak. We just stood in the heavy silence of a lifetime undone. Then he walked away. And for the first time, I didn't want to follow. 2 days later, the court issued its findings. I was sitting on my front porch again, same blanket, different air. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like spring, though the calendar still said winter. Elliot stood beside me, holding the envelope that had just arrived from Vanessa's office. "You want to read it?" he asked. "No," I said, taking a sip of tea. "You read it." He opened it slowly, cleared his throat. "The court hereby denies the petition for post-mortem review and forensic examination of Mr. James Johnson's death. All medical and testimonial evidence confirms natural causes, consistent hospice care, and no evidence of foul play." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. "There's more," he said. He continued reading. "The court further finds sufficient evidence of attempted financial coercion, defamation of character, and abuse of legal process by Mr. Rated Jordan Johnson. Immediate protective injunction is granted. Any attempt to contest the estate moving forward will require direct judicial review." Silence. Then I whispered, "It's over." "No," Elliot said softly. "It's safe. That's not the same. But it's something." I nodded, eyes brimming. Later that afternoon, Vanessa called. "He won't be prosecuted criminally," she said. "Not yet, but the judge referred the findings to the DA's office. That means if Jordan pushes even once more, he could be facing charges." "I don't want him in prison," I told her. "I just want him out of my life." "That," she said, "you now have the right to demand." That night, I wrote a letter. Not to the judge. Not to Vanessa. To Jordan. "Jordan, I don't know what's left between us. Maybe nothing. Maybe someday something softer than this silence will come. But right now, I need you to know what I won't let happen anymore. You don't get to manipulate me. You don't get to smear your father's memory. And you don't get to twist the truth to fit your pain. I forgive the child you were. I ache for the man you've become, but I refuse to carry the weight of your choices any longer. Your mother, Ruthie Mae Johnson." I didn't mail it. I folded it and placed it in the back of James's ledger. The last page. "That weekend, I went to church for the first time in a while. The pastor saw me and smiled wider than usual. A few older women pulled me into hugs that smelled of lilac and menthol balm. 'You're stronger than most,' one of them whispered in my ear. No, not stronger. Just done being afraid." After service, a younger woman approached me in the parking lot. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Johnson?" she asked. "Yes?" "I read your story. My mom went through something similar. Her brother tried to take everything when my grandma passed. We thought we were alone. Thank you for speaking up." I smiled. "You're not alone," I told her. "None of us are. We just have to start saying it louder. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not a gavel, not a verdict. Just a woman finally telling her truth loud enough for someone else to believe theirs." A week after the court's ruling, the dust seemed to settle, but grief has a strange way of resurfacing once the noise fades. I kept waking at 3 a.m., not because of fear, but because for so long I'd lived in defense. And now that the battle was over, my mind didn't know how to stop bracing for war. The house felt too still, too clean. James's favorite cardigan still hung behind the door. I hadn't had the heart to wash it. His scent, leather, cedar, a trace of cologne was still faint, ghostly. One night, I finally walked into his study. I hadn't touched it since his passing. The room was orderly, almost untouched except the ledger, the one that started it all. It lay on the desk, closed, with the letter I'd written to Jordan tucked inside the back cover. I sat in his old chair, the cushion groaning under me like it remembered. There, in the bottom drawer, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a sealed envelope with my name on it. My heart thudded as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 2 months before his death. "My Ruthie, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've found your way to the eye of the storm. I always knew Jordan might not understand what love really looks like. I made mistakes, thinking money could patch over our gaps, that a good education and a few vacations would erase what I never told him, that I saw myself in his flaws, and I was scared of that. But you always knew how to face the hard truths, even when they hurt. That's why I knew you'd be the one to protect what matters. Not just the money, but our name, our memory. Don't let him rewrite it. Not for me, not for you, and certainly not for the truth. Whatever comes, know this. I loved you, Not just when we were happy, but especially when we were fighting. Because even in anger, you were honest. And nothing in this world is more valuable than a woman who tells the truth with her whole chest. Yours forever, James. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there, hands resting on his words, heart too full to move. Later that morning, I made banana bread. James hated bananas, but loved the smell. Said it reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen. I brought a loaf to Donna, the nurse, and left another on Vanessa's desk with a note, "From the quiet that follows courage." That same afternoon, Tasha sent me a message. He's leaving, moving to Arizona. Says he needs space. I stared at the screen for a long while, then typed back, "Let him." She replied, "I'm staying. Starting over. Got a job at the community center. They're offering free therapy. I'm going." I wrote, "Proud of you." She sent a heart. Just one. And somehow, it was enough. That evening, Elliot dropped by with a bottle of wine. "I figured we earned this," he said, lifting the bottle. "Only if we drink to something." He poured. We clinked glasses. "To what?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "To starting again without burning down what we survived." He nodded. "I'll drink to that." And we sat on my porch, under the soft April sky, sipping slowly. The world didn't end. It didn't even crack. But something old and hurtful had finally been laid to rest. Spring moved quietly through Montgomery, painting every dogwood and crepe myrtle with pastel blooms. Life had returned to rhythm, at least on the outside. But inside me, something else was happening. Not grief. Not relief. Something in between. Healing, maybe. It came in unexpected forms, an elderly neighbor asking if I'd teach her how to bake cornbread again. A letter from a former student who read my story in the Gazette and said it helped her confront her own abusive father. A surprise delivery flowers with no note. I suspected Donna. But it was Elliot who brought the question I didn't know I needed to answer. We were walking through the Saturday market, him with a bag of apples, me inspecting a stand of old books when he said it. "You ever think about leaving?" I looked up. "Leaving Montgomery?" He nodded. "You've got the funds, the freedom. A fresh start anywhere you want." I smiled. I used to think about it. When James passed, I imagined coastal towns, quiet beaches, maybe a cabin up north. Somewhere nobody knew me. But now everyone does know me. And not just the gossip. They know the fight I stood for, the voice I didn't let go quiet. He nodded. "I figured you'd say that." I picked up a weathered copy of The Color Purple, flipping gently through the pages. "You think I should go?" "No," he said. "I think you should do what feels like truth. That's what you're best at." That night, I sat down and made a list. Not a bucket list. Just a life list. Things I'd stopped doing because I was too tired, too afraid, too sad. It looked like this. 1. Start a garden. Tomatoes and sunflowers. 2. Rejoin choir. Sing for joy, not for perfection. 3. Write the real story. Not for court, for me. 4. Forgive myself for the years I spent shrinking. 5. Host Sunday dinner again, invite strangers. 6. Call my sister. After all this time. 7. Sleep through the night without flinching at silence. The next day, I bought seeds. And that afternoon, I called my sister. We hadn't spoken since our mother's funeral. Old wounds, old pride. But she answered. "Ruthie?" Her voice cracked. "It's time," I said simply. We talked for an hour, cried, laughed, apologized without saying the word. That night, I stood outside and dug my fingers into the dirt. Planting wasn't just about vegetables. It was about claiming a future I'd once thought belonged only to the broken version of me. Inside, on my desk, Vanessa's final case file sat sealed and labeled, "Closed." I slid it into a drawer, locked it. The past would stay there honored, but done. The next morning, I put on lipstick and a new dress, and I walked to the community center. Tasha was there, organizing pamphlets. She looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Johnson?" "Just Ruthie," I said. "You hiring volunteers?" Her smile bloomed like the sunflowers I'd just planted. "Yes, ma'am. Always." End quote. We started sorting materials, domestic support groups, financial literacy, grief counseling. "Would you ever speak at one of the meetings?" Tasha asked. I hesitated. Then, yes, but not about pain. She raised an eyebrow. Then what? About rising, after it. The first time I stood in front of the community center support group, my hands trembled. Not out of fear, out of reverence. The room wasn't large, just 15 or 20 folding chairs, some filled by quiet women with tired eyes, a few men with nervous postures, all wrapped in that unspoken question, can anyone understand what I've been through? Tasha introduced me simply. This is Ruthie. She's lived through it. I stepped forward. No podium, no script. Just me. I'm not here to tell you how to forgive, I began. I haven't figured that out completely myself. And I'm not here to tell you how to fight. You've already done that just by being here. But I am here to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. I paused. Let the air hold my words. You are not responsible for the wounds others gave you, only for what you do with the healing. A woman in the back nodded slowly. Another dabbed her eyes. So I kept going. I told them about Jordan, about James, about what it meant to protect someone who once protected you, and what it meant to walk away when love turned into leverage. After the meeting, a man approached. Quiet, maybe late 50s. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years, he said. After her mom died, I made some choices I'm not proud of. Reading about your story, it made me think maybe there's still time to try again. There is, I said, but trying again doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means owning it with both hands. He nodded. Thank you. In the days that followed, I kept showing up. Every Wednesday. Sometimes I spoke, sometimes I just listened. But slowly, I felt something strange. Not purpose. Peace. Like I'd finally stepped into the woman I was always becoming. And then came the letter. Mailed. Not emailed. Jordan's handwriting on the front. I held it for a day before opening it. Inside. Mother, I've read every article, listened to every podcast, seen every comment section full of people calling me things I never imagined I'd become, and I earned most of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply, but I want you to know I finally understand what you were trying to protect. It wasn't just money or memory. It was something bigger, something I was too angry to see. I'm in therapy. I've started working construction again. Hands in real work. It's quiet here. Arizona suits silence. If one day you ever want to speak again, I'll be here. Until then, I'll keep trying to become a man you might want to know again. Your son? Jordan. I folded the letter. No tears. Just breath. Slow. Sir. And that night, I placed it next to James's letter. 2 men. 2 hands reaching, one from the past, one maybe from a future not yet born. But both, still mine. Summer came early that year. Montgomery was alive with color hydrangeas like blue clouds, children chasing ice cream trucks down the street, the air thick with honeysuckle and sun. My garden was beginning to bloom. The tomatoes were stubborn, but the sunflowers had already stretched taller than I'd expected, their golden faces following the light like they knew where they were going. I spent my mornings watering them, humming hymns James used to play on Sunday mornings. Music lived in dirt and roots now. It was no longer just memory, it was rhythm, routine, rebirth. Elliot stopped by often, always with something in his hands, a basket of peaches, a new book, a laugh that filled the porch. We didn't define whatever it was between us. We didn't need to. One Saturday, Tasha invited me to speak at the community's annual Stories That Heal event. I declined at first. Surely someone younger, louder, more photogenic could do it. But she insisted. You're not the story, Ruthie, she said. You're the bridge. And right now, people need a way across. So I stood in front of 100 people, under a white canopy in the town square. The mic was temperamental. The folding chairs wobbled. The lemonade was too sweet. But none of that mattered. Because I told the truth. Not just the legal truth. Not just the timeline. I told them what it meant to be wounded by your own blood. To stand in a house you built with love and watch it split down the middle. To forgive a son not because he asked, but because you needed to let go. I ended with the letter from James. And then, for the first time in public, I read Jordan's. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They stood. Quiet. Tears. One woman came forward and held my hand. Her husband followed. Then another. until a circle formed not of sympathy, but of solidarity. That night, I sat on my porch, the air humming with cricket song. I looked at my garden, full of things I'd planted in broken soil, and I realized something. Healing is not the end of the story. It's the seed. The next morning, I got a call from the community center. They were starting a mentorship program for women over 40 who wanted to share their stories, help others navigate grief, betrayal, rebirth. They asked if I'd be the first mentor. I said yes. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally knew the worth of every question. I ended my day by walking to the mailbox. Inside was a small envelope, no return address. Just 2 words in familiar handwriting. Still trying. I smiled, slid it into my back pocket, walked home barefoot through the grass, humming as the sun slipped down behind the trees. The storm had passed, but something stronger had stayed. The lesson from Ruthie's story is simple, yet profound. Even when betrayal comes from those closest to us, we are not defined by the pain they cause, but by how we rise beyond it. Justice is not always a courtroom verdict, but the quiet dignity of standing in your truth, even when the world doubts you. Healing doesn't erase the past, it honors it, then gently teaches us to plant something new in its place.